Hello, and welcome back to Rekindling the Legacy podcast. I'm Dr. Juhi Gupta.
And I am Professor Andrew Davis, and we are coming to you today courtesy of the Inclusive Futures Foundation. You can find out about our work online at theinclusivefuturesfoundation.com, but we are an Indian NGO that works on education, healthcare, the environment, the rights of women and children, a few areas in that sort of space. Do go and look up our work online and find out more about what we do.
So today we are traveling to 19th century Punjab to explore the extraordinary story of a queen who became such a formidable opponent that the British East India Company called her the Messalina of Punjab and the rallying point of rebellion. Yes, we are talking about Maharani Jind Kaur, also known as Rani Jindan, who ruled as regent of the Sikh Empire and became one of the first queens in India to truly terrorize the British colonial administration.
What I think makes her story particularly compelling is the way in which she transformed from a young bride into a political strategist who was so effective that the British feared her influence more than that of entire armies. They quite literally separated her from her child because they were terrified of what the two of them might accomplish together.
Jind Kaur Aulak was born in 1817 in Chachar in Gujranwala. She was the youngest of three siblings, and in 1835, her extraordinary beauty caught the attention of Maharaja Ranjit Singh, the Lion of Punjab, who made her his youngest wife.
The timing here is crucially important. Maharaja Ranjit Singh had built the Sikh Empire into one of the most powerful forces in the Indian subcontinent, one of the few kingdoms that the British genuinely feared. In 1838, Jind Kaur gave birth to her only child, Duleep Singh.
But tragedy struck on June 17, 1839, when Maharaja Ranjit Singh died from liver failure. Suddenly, this young woman in her early 20s found herself navigating the dark waters of succession politics in a kingdom that was beginning to fragment.
Initially, she and her son lived under the protection of Dhyan Singh in Jammu, while Sher Singh, one of Ranjit Singh's sons, became ruler. But when Sher Singh was assassinated, 5-year-old Duleep Singh was proclaimed king in 1843.
And this is where Jind Kaur's remarkable political acumen emerged. When her son became king at just 5 years old, she became the regent queen. But there were many people in the kingdom who wanted to rule on behalf of the young king.
So this is extraordinary. She convinced the king's council to support her through the sheer power of her oratory. Imagine this young woman, fairly recently widowed, standing before a council of seasoned politicians and military leaders and persuading them that she was the right person to guide the kingdom.
Under her regency, the Sikh Empire flourished. She worked to re-establish equilibrium between the civil administration and the army, and she had the support of newly appointed elder statesmen and the military leaders.
But she was facing enormous challenges. There was a power struggle between various Sikh factions, and some were already negotiating with the British East India Company for their personal gain. The empire that Ranjit Singh had built was beginning to fracture from within.
Jind Kaur made strategic moves to strengthen her position. She arranged for her son to be engaged to the daughter of Chhatar Singh Atriwala, the governor of Hazara, because he was influential in the Sikh community. She understood that political alliances required personal bonds.
But the British were closing in. On December the 13th, 1845, Sir Henry Harding, the British Governor-General, declared war against the Sikhs. This was the first Anglo-Sikh war, and despite Jind Kaur's efforts to protect her kingdom, the Sikhs were ultimately defeated.
And the aftermath was devastating. In March 1846, the Treaty of Lahore was signed. While Duleep Singh remained king and Jind Kaur remained regent, their power was severely curtailed. By December, The British has replaced her with the Council of Regency.
But even that wasn't enough for the British. In August 1847, following a conflict with the colonial administration, Jind Kaur was imprisoned. Think of this, they were so afraid of this young woman that they couldn't leave her free, even after stripping away most of her power.
She was initially detained in Summon Tower of Lahore Fort, then moved to Sheikhupura's fortress. But the cruelest blow was being separated from a 9-year-old son. Her letters to the British are heartbreaking. He has no sister, no brother. He has no uncle, senior or junior. His father he has lost. To whose care has he been entrusted?
The British were unmoved. They kept her separated from Duleep Singh for 13 and a half years because they feared her influence might lead to an uprising. They called her a potential rallying point of rebellion and ultimately exiled her from the Punjab entirely.
And this humiliation was deliberate and systematic. Her jewelry was confiscated, which was particularly insulting for a queen. She was sent to Chunar Fort, 45 kilometers from Varanasi, essentially imprisoned hundreds of miles from her homeland.
But here's where Jind Kaur's story becomes almost legendary. In 1849, she disguised herself as a servant and escaped from Chunar Fort. She then travelled the 800 kilometres through dangerous territory to reach sanctuary in Nepal.
800 kilometers, Andrew, on foot, disguised as a servant through hostile territory. This wasn't just an escape. This was an epic journey that required incredible courage and determination.
She reached Kathmandu in April 1849 and found refuge under Amar Bikram Shah, who had been Prime Minister of Nepal from 1838 to 1839. She was treated like royalty there, which speaks to the respect that she commanded even in exile.
But even in Nepal, she had to remain vigilant. She would disguise herself as a maid whenever strangers visited, so the British wouldn't discover her location. A Char Bhuja Darbar was built for her, where she lived for 11 years, while the British kept a close watch, always fearing she might try to revive the Sixth dynasty.
During this period, her son Duleep Singh repeatedly tried to contact his mother, but the British wouldn't permit it. Can you imagine the emotional toll of that, being separated from your child for over a decade, knowing they're growing up without you?
And it wasn't until 1861 that the British finally allowed mother and son to reunite, and only because they no longer considered her a threat. Duleep Singh negotiated for a return of his mother's jewelry and urged the British to allow her to travel to England with him.
But exile in England brought its own kind of suffering. Jind Kaur was deeply unhappy there, constantly thinking about her lost Sikh Empire and what had become of her people and her homeland.
On August 1st, 1863, Maharani Jind Kaur died in her sleep at Abingdon House in Kensington. Even in death, the British made things difficult. Cremation was illegal in England and they wouldn't permit her body to be taken to Punjab.
It wasn't until 1864 that Duleep Singh finally got permission to take her body to Mumbai, where she could be cremated according to Sikh traditions. Even her final journey home was delayed and controlled by the colonial administration.
What strikes me most about Jind Kaur's story is how the British response to her reveals just how formidable she was. You don't separate a mother from her child for 13 years unless you are genuinely terrified of what she might accomplish.
Exactly, the label Messalina of Punjab was meant to be derogatory, but it actually reveals their fear and grudging respect. They saw her as dangerously powerful, capable of rallying opposition against their rule.
Her story has been honored in recent years. In 2010, a docudrama called The Rebel Queen was made about her life. And in 2020, Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni published The Last Queen to commemorate her legacy.
Jihi, what's particularly remarkable to me is how Jind Kaur maintained her dignity and fighting spirit throughout years of imprisonment, exile, and separation from her child. Lesser people would have been broken by what she endured.
She also demonstrated incredible political intelligence. Her regency was effective, her strategic marriage alliance was smart, and her escape to Nepal was brilliantly executed. She wasn't just brave, she was genuinely skilled in statecraft.
The alliance her deceased husband had made with Nepal proved crucial to her survival. Even in exile, she understood how to leverage international relationships for protection.
And think about the broader historical context. This was happening during the period when the British were systematically dismantling Indian kingdoms through the doctrine of lapse and other colonial policies. She was fighting not just for her family, but for the very survival of indigenous rule.
The Sikh Empire under Ranjit Singh had been one of the last major independent kingdoms in the subcontinent. Jind Kaur was quite literally the last queen of Punjab, defending the final remnants of Sikh sovereignty.
And her story also highlights the particular challenges faced by women in positions of power during this period. She had to prove herself not just as a ruler, but as a woman worthy of ruling in a male dominated society.
And yet she succeeded in ways that many men of the era did not. She maintained the loyalty of her supporters, she successfully governed during her regency, and she remained a symbol of resistance even in exile.
The fact that the British kept watching her for over a decade, even in Nepal, shows that they never stopped seeing her as a potential threat. That's the mark of a truly formidable opponent.
Jind Kaur's legacy reminds us that resistance takes many forms. Sometimes it's leading armies, sometimes it's governing wisely, and sometimes it's simply refusing to be broken by those who want to destroy you.
She was called the Queen the British feared, and she earned that title through her intelligence, her courage, and her absolute refusal to surrender her dignity or her principles.
From teenage bride to regent queen to political prisoner to exile to symbol of resistance, Maharani Jind Kaur lived through one of the most turbulent periods in Indian history and remained unbowed throughout.
And that brings us to the end of this episode. We want to thank you for joining us on this episode of Rekindling the Legacy. And until next time, remember that sometimes the greatest victories are measured not in battles won, but in spirits that refuse to be conquered.
And if you want to learn more about those spirits that can't be conquered, then do join us for our next episode. Why not subscribe to the channel so you can be sure you don't miss anything? Thanks for joining us.